And of course, it's still the big story making international headlines. U.S. President Joe Biden expected to give an address to the nation sometime this week after announcing his decision to step down from the race to the White House. Vice President Kamala Harris has been endorsed for the Democratic Party's presidential nominee. Now, in fact, the leading Democrats endorsed Harris for the nomination just hours after Biden announced that he'll end his re-election campaign, bringing an abrupt and humbling conclusion to his half-a-century-long political career. In a statement late yesterday, the 81-year-old said he would remain in his role as president and commander-in-chief until his term ends in January next year. This dramatic development comes just 4 months before Americans head to the polls. It follows weeks of intense pressure from Biden's fellow Democrats after his faltering debate performance, against Republican challenger Donald Trump. Let's make sense of it all for you. Bring in Professor of Political Science and International Relations at Cypress College. That's Peter Matthews, who's with us via our video link live from Los Angeles this morning. And Prof, it's lovely to have you on the program. Thanks very much indeed for making time. I mean, it's just after 9 o'clock where we are in Johannesburg, and I know after midnight for you. So we really do appreciate your staying up to help us make sense of what's taking place. So, as I mentioned, Joe Biden has been facing pressure for quite some time to step down. We're told some instances that pressure has been coming from inside the Democratic Party itself. I wonder if we know yet what ultimately pushed him over the edge to this point where he makes this announcement.
Well, I think it was some very close advisors that he has. He has a very tight inner circle. And a handful of advisors, I think a couple of them, basically told him, they showed him the polling data for the last few weeks where his polling numbers have been going down, especially in the swing states. And one of the advisors told him, Mr. President, you really can't win this election. And it could also endanger the House and Senate, which we might lose as well. So I think Joe Biden, being the great patriot he is, great president who actually contributed so much to this country and the investment programs he came up with when he was in office. It's like Franklin Roosevelt investing in infrastructure and technology, saving us from COVID, helping us get out of COVID. All those things were big achievements. And so Biden had achieved so much that he can actually be thanked by a lot of Democrats for doing this very noble activity by saying he's going to turn this over to the vice president who's highly qualified. His vice president, he chose himself. That's probably what happened. It's actually what did happen, I think.
And, in fact, initially when he sent out that statement, it wasn't very clear if he was going to endorse Kamala Harris. I think there was communication thereafter that he would do that. And we'll speak about, whether that is the smart strategic decision to make. But just in terms of making sense of the decision first, many people have told us that nothing like this has ever happened before, where at this very late stage of campaigning, somebody as important, I suppose, as Joe Biden would pull out of the race. And I wonder what you reckon this signals about the Democratic Party and what might be taking place inside the organization, given, the kind of support Trump might receive.
Well, the party, most of them are very excited about this new candidacy of the vice president, who'll be running for president now, and I'm pretty sure she's going to actually win the nomination with no problem very quickly. And then she has all these endorsements. She's been endorsed by President Biden, but also by former President Clinton and Senator Hillary Clinton and Senator Elizabeth Warren, Congresswoman AOC. I could go on, and for several governors who were thinking about possibly who they would consider to be running against her for this position. They've actually endorsed her. Governor Newsom of California, Governor Shapiro of Pennsylvania, and there's a whole long list. She's collected huge amounts of endorsements in this first day itself. And by the way, they raised over $15 million of donations in this one day alone. It was a huge record. And it's big donors and small donors. So she's like a juggernaut right now. I think she's going to have a good time, not that much difficulty actually becoming the nominee, and then she'll go forward with a lot of confidence, which she's already acquired by being in the major leagues. She's the only potential candidate who played in the major leagues. Meaning that the very top. She was the side of the president, heartbeat away from the presidency, and she actually helped make major decisions as well with him.
Yeah. Ironically, the Republican Party, we're told, was kind of hoping Joe Biden would have stayed on, because it just had so much on him. And you spoke about some of the polling that you reckon may have made the difference for him ultimately making that decision to step down. Is Kamala Harris a better contender against a Donald Trump? And I appreciate that's a bit of a broad question to ask, but a question that I imagine many people have been mulling over in the last few hours.
Frankly, her numbers are the highest of all of the potential candidates. And she is, in fact, her numbers against Trump are higher than Joe Biden's numbers against Trump. And she's very strong in so many areas. She was a prosecutor. Don't forget her background. She was the San Francisco district attorney. First, she got elected to that. Then she became the California attorney general. Then she became a U.S. senator from California, and then vice president. So with that kind of background, a prosecutorial background, she can literally put out a pretty strong prosecution against whether or not President Trump should be the next president, or whether she should. That'll be quite an interesting debate to see between the two of them when they get to the stage. I think that Trump and his guys, including Vance, probably preferred to run against Biden. So I think it's going to be very exciting for many Democrats to see. She'll activate a lot of people that were kind of lukewarm to Biden. For example, young people who are upset with President Biden because of his stance. He wasn't firm enough about preventing the killing of so many Gazans in the Gaza fiasco with Israel. When the terrorists hit Israel, then Israel hit back, and 36,000 people in Gaza, civilians mostly, were killed. And the young people, 18-year-old voters, 19, 25, 29-year-old voters, were very upset that they were holding back on supporting President Biden. And she's going to bring them back. But she called for a ceasefire early on. Furthermore, she's pro-choice on abortion. And many people, including young people, think that's a very important issue to make sure a woman has the right to choose. Those issues, economic issues, immigration, she was good on that. She helped with the border crisis. In fact, when President Biden when Biden brought in this new executive order not long ago, that actually reduced undocumented crossings of the border by over 50%. Right. And that was quite remarkable as well. And that's an issue that the Republicans were hoping to ride out, but they couldn't do that. So I think the Republicans are kind of, they asked what they didn't want to get necessarily. It's like when the dog catches the car, it doesn't know what to do with it. Well, they got the car now. Let's see what happens.
Indeed. And we know, of course, identity politics still feature very prominently in the US. The last time there was a major contender, a woman contender for the race, was Hillary Clinton back in 2016, and she lost to Donald Trump. And so much of the commentary thereafter was speaking about how America is just not ready to reckon with a woman president yet. Before then, the first black president was Barack Obama, and he was elected in 2008. We've got a Kamala Harris who sits on the intersection of these two identities that many people say Americans are just not ready to deal with yet. And because of that, the Democratic Party is seen as essentially taking a gamble against the historical trends of how voters typically decide in the US. Do you think the time is ripe for the first black female president of the United States?
Absolutely. I'll tell you why. Because don't forget, Hillary Clinton actually won 3 million more votes than Donald Trump. And yet she lost because of the Electoral College. So she actually got more of the votes in America than Donald Trump did in that election. Kamala Harris has got so much going for her besides being a strong woman who has shown leadership qualities. She also has ethnic ancestry from India. Her mom was Indian American, but she has the Asian American connection as well as the African American solid identity, which is all very strong. And many people are rallied with her. Young people, as I said, progressives. She got the endorsement of the Progressive Caucus in Congress. The Congressional Black Caucus leadership have endorsed her. The Hispanic Caucus leadership have endorsed her. And there are many, many women that are so excited now because of the issue that the first time in our history that we may have actually a woman president, which would be very remarkable. It's very possible it could happen, especially if she continues in the trajectory which she's been showing so far.
Right. As expected, a lot of people who I suppose are more associated with the Republican Party are saying if Joe Biden isn't fit enough for re-election, he's frankly not fit enough to remain in office. And so there's this growing call for him to step down, even though he mentioned in his own statement that he's willing to see through the rest of his term until January next year. Do you see him hanging on to that, given the public perception around why he wouldn't be fit for a re-election to begin with?
I'm pretty sure I would have to say he'll probably be okay all the way through January. It's about 6 months away. And the only way he can be forced out is if they invoke the 25th Amendment. For that to work, the U.S. vice president has to call the cabinet together, which is a Democratic cabinet like her, or Democratic appointed cabinet, and she'd have to call them together. It would take a vote, and if a majority of the cabinet agrees to say that the president is incapacitated, and they have to show that he's incapacitated. So the majority agrees that he's incapacitated, cannot carry out his duties. Then he will be asked to resign and let the vice president become the acting president. But if he disagrees and says, I'm not going to go anywhere, I'm fine, Then the Congress gets involved and there's a vote taken there. It's a very cumbersome step. It's never been taken before. And it'll be, so far, I think only Republicans in the Congress, some of them are asking for that to be invoked to get him out. That's an interesting question, though. They're saying, if he can't campaign, how can he be president? Well, there are two different kinds of functions, and they have different skills. So he's been doing pretty well as president so far, and I think that he'll probably last all the way the next 6 months.
All right. Peter Matthews, we appreciate your time. Thanks for giving us your perspective on this most historic decision, dare I say. Peter Matthews is a professor of political science and international relations with Cyprus College. Once again, appreciate your time. And we'll certainly keep watching that space and get you a sense of what takes place moving forward in the context, of course, as I mentioned, of just how unprecedented this moment is.